I have with me, joining me being joined by our Abuja Bureau Chief, Tai Amodu, who witnessed the swearing in there. Let's throw more light on this ceremony. Now, before you get on that, I also have with me Mr. DeVeo Okorie, who is a public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
But before I come to you, let's join our correspondent there in Abuja, who was there while the ministers were being handed their portfolios. Tell us, what's the reaction like in the Federal Capital Territory?
Now, there's a lot of excitement now. It took 3 months for President Muhammadu Buhari to come up and put in place his cabinet. That is a vast improvement on his first time in office, when it took about 6 months for him to come up with his cabinet and swear them into office. But the ministers now have to hit the ground running, because they have a task already in front of them. And the first task that they have to do, and they have to do in a hurry, is to get the budget ready. The Buhari administration is determined to ensure that the budget returns to a January to December cycle, which means that between the next 2 weeks, the ministers have to meet with their permanent secretaries. They have to consider what is on ground in their ministries and come up with a budget that is for the 2020, that can be put in place and can be taken to the National Assembly, to ensure that when the National Assembly returns from recess, a budget is ready for them to consider. So that is a task in front of them. Of course, the President also talked about the fact that this time around, he expects that all the ministers should work together. Already he has put in place a plan of action to ensure that this time around there is nothing like complacency, and that everything works well. In such matters, he expects that the ministers, all the ministers, will put any requests for meetings through the head of, through the chief of staff, while the secretary to the government of the federation will ensure that everything concerning the Federal Executive Council comes through him to the president.
Yeah. Very important duty there for the ministers as they hit the ground run. But let me come to our public affairs analyst, Mr. DeVeo Okorie. What do you make of the composition of this cabinet and the portfolios being handed to the various ministers?
Well, at last we finally have them. And left for me, I think they should dispense with the celebrations very quickly, because they have their homework cut out for them. However, they dispensed the ministerial portfolios. We do know it was more on the political side than on the technical side. And each of them have their ministries, their agencies and departments under them to work with them to be able to deliver the mandates that they've been given. So there is no time. We are far behind schedule. I expect each of them, who have not had much background in the areas that they have been assigned, to quickly begin to familiarize themselves with most of the duties and the protocols or procedures, and then the individuals who would aid their delivery of their mandates.
But if you look at the 12 ministers that are returning, to their offices, how would you rate their performances in the last 4 years?
Well, I mean, we know that the last 4 years was very challenged. We didn't see the change that we were promised as we expected. Today we are suffering that in terms of social welfare, economic sustainability, and even job employment. So at this point, it's not time to appraise. It's actually time to get to work. If they've been there before, what it means is that they should have some level of experience as to what to do. And this is their second chance to be able to get it right if they couldn't meet up to standard in the first 4 years. Okay,
Mr. Okorie, let me get back to our bureau chief there, Tai Amodu. Tai, looking at the portfolios that have been handed out to the ministers, what do you say from the reactions you got after the assignment of the portfolios? What was the reaction of some of the ministers before they got to their various ministries?
Most of the ministers are raring to go. Of course, you know that it is going to be an advantage to the 12 ministers that are returning. They are returning to their old portfolios, and that should ensure that at least they will be they know the challenges of their ministries, and they are able to wake up and ensure that they get to work quickly. For the new ministers, comes as a challenge. Now they have to, first and foremost, within 2 weeks, try to ensure that they get the budgets of their ministries together. It means that, and the president also emphasized it, they must be able to collaborate with their permanent secretaries. They must be able to collaborate with the heads of agencies under their purview. You know, it's a big task before them, and it seems as if right now the administration of President Buhari is in a hurry. You know, this is going to be his last term, and the president is determined to ensure that at least he leaves behind legacies, and to ensure that this team must work together. And he has emphasized that over and over again. What the presidential retreat that happened for 2 days was to ensure that the ministers, the new ministers, and the ones that are old and are returning were able to see what the challenges were. They were taking on the economy, they were taking on policies of government, and this should ensure that at least they have a fair grasp of how government works and should prepare them for what they are supposed to do. The Federal Executive Council will be meeting every Wednesday, and they expect that these ministers in their meetings will have up-to-date information about what the needs of their ministries are and how to go forward.
Tai Amodu, let me get back to Mr. Okorie. Mr. Okorie, looking at the portfolios, a lot of persons, you know, I talked about the former the cabinet composition last time, power, works and housing. Now we have works and housing for Mr. Babatunde Fashola. You have power separately, and also you now have Zainab Ahmed taking over finance and national budget and planning. How do you think this will help in achieving the next level agenda of President Muhammadu Buhari?
Well, I think based on the precedents, the presidency, and also I believe the political party, that's the APC, also had a review of the outcome of the last 4 years. And I think especially in terms of Fashola, where he held 3 ministries, some quarters deemed it as overreaching and overwhelming. So this time round, I think they've divided that with a view to efficiency, I would want to believe. For the Ministry of Finance, with Zainab Ahmed, usually in finance and planning and budgeting, they go together. So they've done a little rearrangement, even though they've joined a few. Remember, this time around, the ministerial cabinet has actually increased, yes, to about 43. So we would wait to see how these new combinations work for the full implementation of the presidential mandate, especially within the next 1 year, because you do know the first year, we call it settlements, where they begin to take their time and get into their portfolios. The second year, the planning. The third year, they start discussing the politics. And the fourth year, we don't see them anymore.
Very interesting. We'll wait to see what will happen in the coming days. Public Affairs Analyst DeVeo Okorie, thank you so much for joining us. Our Bureau Chief, Tai Amodu, thank you so much for updates. We'll surely stay with you to give us more updates on this developing story.